Yep. So yeah, as mentioned, today's webinar is presented by us in collaboration with the CMPP Community Navigator Pilot Program, funded by USPAC and SBA. So this program was established by the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, and the SBA, Small Business Administration, launched this program to strengthen outreach to underserved business by just partnering with organizations with deep root in the community. And here are some of the services that is available for free at no additional cost for all small businesses under the program. And if you're interested, feel free to email us. Our email is over there. Also, and let us know if you are interested. And we also have a Q&A after your presentation as well. So if you have any question during the presentation, in the chat, in the Q&A, let's make this interactive as possible as you would also like. So yeah, without further ado, I will give it over for you, Robespierre.
Amazing. Thank you, Tao. Hello, everyone in the audience. My name is Robespierre Dornigan. I am let's start with, I'm a digital marketer. I'm from Queens, New York. I'm also a dance teacher, a photographer, and recently joining in on the human resources industry and switching gears a little bit too. So I'm someone who just sort of likes to dabble and experiment and grow in different ways by exposing myself to all different things within New York City. So I'm really happy to be here again, speaking on behalf of New Media and CMPP, as Tao mentioned. This is a great organization, both places to reach out if you need help with your marketing goals or anything going on with your business, whether you're a sole practitioner like myself who teaches dance on a monthly basis, or you run a bakery or a studio, or you're part of Business Solutions. And I know we're in the chat, we're sort of learning about what everyone is doing and up to. So again, I mentioned as you for joining, if you are just joining in the chat, please introduce yourself in the chat and mention your name and then what industry or business you're a part of, just so we can sort of get to know one another as much as we can, webinar wise. I know when we do public events in person, which we also do on a monthly basis, those are also great opportunities to network, but let's try our best to learn about each other in the chat. And again, thank you guys so much for coming and spending your time with me to learn about content creation, storytelling, and how all that relates to the way you project that story on places like social media. If you joined me last time, I had a speaking event with New Media. I talked a lot in depth about storytelling and how specifically you want to be able to craft, curate your story, and then how to engage that with people online and communicate. I will be going over a little bit of that today as just more of a base for how I like to present my work, but also taking a bit of a deep dive and looking at examples of my own work on social media, but as well as other brands that I really respect and admire in the way they tell their stories. So yeah, let's just dive into it. I'm gonna be basically talking about what is storytelling in the first place. I think it's something that we overlook a lot. Like, we always hear about storytelling, we hear about social media, we hear about like content and video creation, but we're in this sort of day and age where it gets churned out quite a bit, quite often, and almost at speeds that are a bit much for a lot of people to really stop and think and really try to absorb, like, what is it we're trying to tell and communicate to the world via this insane thing that we have carrying around our pockets all day? Because it's not just the phone. This is something I mentioned the last time I spoke, but this is literally a microphone to the entire world, to the entire universe. And when you engage with the internet and the way we do in the year 2023, you're putting yourself out there. You're putting your story out there. You're putting your personal context and experiences out to the world, whether it's for your own brand or your own image or personality, to tell the story and to bring some meaning to your life, or you're representing a brand or a business or an entire mission behind that, right? So keep that in mind too. I know I mentioned that the last time I spoke, but I really want to make that an emphasis into really thinking very intentionally of like what this thing is. Like, it's more than just something you text your friends with and set up Hinge dates with. This is a microphone. This is a microphone to the entire universe that you have in the palm of your hand. And with storytelling, by just taking a step back today and spending our time learning a little bit more about what that is, learning about my story and how I've crafted that, I think all of us can go out after today and really be a little more intentional with not only what we share, but how we share it on places like social media. And then like, what is my story? So that one, you guys can get a little more context into who I am. I'm not just like a person speaking out into the void, but really like learning about the person who's trying to teach you the things that I've had to learn through trial and error over time will give you a sense of how I've sort of got here in my journey. And then we're blending those two things together. We're giving you just concepts that I have helped, that has personally helped me in my journey to better make and maximize the use of places like social media and how to really curate content that is both enjoyable for yourself to not only make, but for the people that end up listening to you and engaging with you online, and blending all that together. So, and hopefully if things go time-wise, we have time for Q&A from you guys. Tao, just one favor, I can't seem to find the chat again in Zoom. I'm more of like a team Slack person, but just let me know if there are like any specific questions that come up in the chat. Feel free to pause me. I like to really keep my events and speaking opportunities as engaging as possible. So you guys can ask questions at any time if something really sticks out to you. And obviously we also have Q&A at the end. So yeah, we'll get to all that. I really want to hear what you guys are thinking about the things I present here. Okay, let's break it down. What is storytelling? If we go all the way down into Merriam-Webster's, it is the vivid description of ideas, beliefs, personal experiences, and life lessons through stories or narratives that invoke power, emotions, and insight. One of my favorite questions I literally love to ask people when I get to know them or go on dates or I go talk to coworkers is, what's your favorite movie? Like it's funny meeting people that literally can't tell you like can't even name like a top series of movies they like. Think about every movie, every book you've been a part of, any fun dinner event you ever been around. We're constantly telling stories on a day-to-day basis. Even me right now, I'm telling you the story of my life and social media and how all this has come to fruition in the sense of my career and the trajectory that I have had. But if you think about it, we're telling stories on a very constant basis. You go to work and someone asks you on Monday morning, like, what did you do that weekend? Yeah, sometimes half the people might not really have much to say, or maybe they choose not to share, but you notice like the people that you tend to gravitate to, or the people you start to build connections to, is because they have a good essence, a good understanding of how to describe so well, so vividly, a personal experience they might have had and some sort of lesson or takeaway from said event or moment or like a weekend or all of that. And yes, I know the way I'm describing it is a bit extra or a bit like maybe not always the case every time you tell a story. It doesn't always have to be this grandiose 1.5 hour occasion where you're telling like a movie. But if you think about it, the best people that you gravitate to, the books that you listen to, the speakers you enjoy, the brands or the people you follow on Instagram that you continue to come back to time and time again for content, it's because they have gone this understanding and grasp of who they are as a brand or who they are as a person. And what I want to share with you guys today is, if you're struggling like me at one point to be someone who doesn't fully know yet how to, well, one, tell their story, but how we can find ways to be creative in that. We live in an age where that's limitless now at this point. But whether you're even think about yourself at like a dinner party, right? You think of all the different conversations that go around a dinner with who you are. You're like just constantly hearing these little things, these little stories, anecdotes along the way to build support, build more interest in what you're fully trying to tell someone, whether it's like a point or educating someone with like a life lesson, or really just being able to share context with somebody. And I'll talk more about why context and life and all that in the sort of things that I've used in my personal life to help me further tell my story and my personal experiences to you guys. Because your business, why you're here, your brand, business, or mission that you're on is just only one part of your story. And what I love to tell people when I present this sort of part is, you may have this product or brand or a business that you're personally trying to promote on places like social media or somewhere out there in the vast internet. But I think we often forget that where you are right now at this very moment on Thursday, May 25th, 2023, is a combination of everything that has ever happened before you, right? At this very moment, every book you've ever read, every movie you've ever experienced, every good or bad moment in your life is all led you to this moment, listening to this webinar that you happen to just sign on to and be interested and engaged in, right? But that's a very long story. And in between there, we have to pick apart and learn about what are all the pieces of context that we want to take away from all of our experiences that we've had so far in our lives to tell people why we are here and why we have a brand that they should care about, why this brand or message or me as a person brings value, hopefully, to your life in some sort of form or fashion through going back in time, revisiting who we are, asking ourselves the tough questions. And I'll share a little bit more about how I got to that. But here, I really just wanted to highlight that while, yes, you may be here for a purpose to learn how content creation and storytelling is going to, and social media is going to help your particular brand or business or product that you may have, at the end of the day, it's all a combination of things that have already happened, right? So you have all the data and all the information you need to tell a good story. It's about going back and doing the hard work of really crafting and curating that, so then you can get to the fun part, which is the creative part of social media and content creation, and figuring out the best way to tell that. So I want you guys to just keep that in mind as we head into this, that like, yes, there's more to me than just, I guess, what meets the eye with people, what they sort of see at first with my brand or my business. I like to share this because while there's a lot of information on this side, I want you guys to kind of focus. I'll take you through this like timeline by year of all the things that have happened to me. I think since I guess entered adulthood in my 20s, I'm in my 30s now, and you may think like, oh, this guy, he's speaking on this event, he's like trying to help us teach us something about social media and storytelling. But at the same time, there's so many things that have happened to me in my life. And I can't tell you the entire story of my life, but I will tell you bits and pieces of it in this timeline that have sort of helped shape me into the person I am today, to help me tell my story online. And as you go through the rest of the 40 minutes we're going to spend together, and after this too, it's like thinking about everything that has happened in your life, not just this very moment, but all the little ups and downs and wins and losses and trials and tribulations that have happened to you to get you to the person that is standing here today listening, right? So like I'm a marketer, I'm in human resources now, but I started my journey way back in adulthood, and when I graduated from school in 2010 in accounting. And I don't do anything related to accounting anymore ever again. So while this is a webinar about maybe social media and content creation, this could also be just a life lesson type thing here, where what you studied or what you do before or what business you might have run, that isn't always going to be the be all end all of your life. Especially our generation. If you are in my generation, we come from parents who have taught us that maybe there is this sort of like one-dimensional way to look at things in certain ways, and a lot of respect to that. But as the world adapts, as the world changes, we too as people also change, and whether it's our career choices, the businesses we choose, the life paths that we go on. And I like to mention this a lot in my events, but I believe that the only constant in life is truly change. And when we are people that allow ourselves to be okay with that, to accept that notion of things constantly changing, we can just be ahead of everyone else and adapt and know how we can truly be ahead and get closer to our future version of ourselves, that we'll tell that story one day. Yeah. And then I started this whole journey of learning marketing, and then sort of going through terrible experiences at my first agencies, not feeling super confident, not being someone that could vocally express like his opinion or story, because I was just a less confident person back then. I didn't have a mentor at the time, people that really looked out for me and my well-being and really cared about me one day getting on the microphone, telling my story. So it took me many years, I guess, in my looking back, reflecting on it, it took me, a good 8, 9, 10 years to even get to this point of having these opportunities to speak to people about what does it mean to like craft a story in the first place. Because I think, and this is getting very philosophical here, but I think life really takes a toll on us. Life is hard in so many ways, and it gets us to this point where we feel like we don't have a story to tell even, or that it's not worth our time to tell our story to people. But if anyone out there who has ever met me in person, I think you know this about me, but I'm a big listener, I'm a big people person in the sense of I'm very curious about other people's lives and context, because I think we're all connected in a way that all our stories matter, and all our stories and the ability to share them collectively is what creates more great shared experiences with one another, and ultimately helps ourselves feel more seen in the world by curating and navigating your story. So it took me many years in different groups of people I've worked with, different agencies, different accounts, to really ground my foot in marketing. And the last place I was just at, that I left a few months ago, I spent a lot of time there really fostering my identity as both a person, a speaker, a manager of people, really like finally figuring out in the most recent years of just like who I am and how I really want to tell my story to the world. And down at the bottom, you'll see some text here of all the sort of random things that have happened along the way too. In 2013, I, like many of you, started my own business. I had a dance studio that we ran for 8 successful years in the city called House of Movement. We unfortunately closed in 2020 because of the world changing, obviously. But yeah, that was something, while it is closed, a lot of people, even to this day, ask me, oh man, I'm really sorry. Like, I can't believe that happened. Or do you have plans of reopening at any point? And the way I look at that sort of question and the response now is that it was simply just a chapter in my life that I'll be eternally grateful for. And had that not happened, you don't know what sort of things it may or may not have been able to lead you down the road. Maybe I wouldn't have been able to speak on events like this. I wouldn't have been able to pick up other activities that I'll mention, or go travel to places that I always wanted experiences because of maybe certain things. So just know that, yeah, like the businesses you start, the ideas you have, like it doesn't ever always last forever. And that's sort of the takeaway here I have when it came to starting my own business and journey many years ago with my partners. I've experienced what it's like to work for other businesses that are very new at the time. I worked at random startups like Go Butler. I've spent some time working at Uber for a little bit in their human resources department for one summer. I worked for a language school called Fluent City and tried out their very new, very small team. And then you sort of get that sort of behind the scenes of what it also might be like, maybe not necessarily crafting your own brand or message or business right away, but all these little projects or businesses that I was also a part of got to give me exposure into, sort of the good and bad things that go on within running your own thing. And then all the different I guess activities, things I'm now passionate about have come into the frame, literally the frame, with photography. I started that in 2016. I started doing jump rope because our studio closed and I couldn't be active anymore in 2020. Now I've been doing that for 4 years and helping teach people that. And then taking a stab at random things that I thought I just would never have been interested in ever. But it gets to points where, you never want to go into things thinking like, you never want to go the rest of your life thinking like, what if? And I started doing stand-up comedy last year and did shows and learned so much about what it means to be a speaker in an environment that requires laughter. And I've learned some of that through now the speaking events that I do. So all these things, all these random things that you think wouldn't ever really connect to or make sense of right now, led to something. Carla is in the audience and she mentioned she's, she owns a bakery here in Queens, right? But, I can't wait to check that out later on Instagram as we finish up later. But it's like you think about like, okay, what is the story of like how all the little things that have happened along the way get to this moment and starting this bakery of this mission of this brand. I love quoting Steve Jobs on this one, but he has an amazing quote, and I'm gonna just paraphrase this, but he talks about how you can't connect the dots in your life by trying to look ahead and plan things out meticulously and trying to make sense of all that. But you can only really start to connect the dots and make sense of things when you take a moment to stop and step back and look at all the literally on the screen right now, all the little dots that have led me to the moment I'm at right now. And I keep nailing and drilling home this concept of looking back to your own story and thinking about all the little things. And it takes time. It takes time to do this and really figure out, okay, like if this had happened, this wouldn't, if this thing to that, and then start connecting it backwards, as Steve Jobs would say. I don't know if there's questions in the chat. I'm just going to quickly. I'm just hearing thumbs ups and yeses. Amazing, amazing. Okay, but yeah, just wanted to share this slide with you because it gives you a little more context into who I am and my overall story to start to help you guys think about that for yourselves. You know, like whether it's going back and creating a slide like this, I'll find a way to share this template with you guys so you can fill it in yourselves. And then you look at the screen and you take a look back and you're like, holy shit, like I did a lot of random things. And maybe if you didn't do a lot of random things, maybe that's a sign to go do random things, right? Go experiment. And I'll talk a little bit about that when it comes to social media too. Because here's where we get to the crazy part, the most difficult part. I would say to people all the time that it's now time to figure out what your story is. And it took me many years to find that confidence, to find that microphone, to reach for it for the first time, grab it and tell the people of the world like who I am and why I'm here and why does it even matter. And so that's the question that we're going to answer today is like, what is your story? And the way I found mine is just through all these different avenues of creativity and asking myself all the tough, well, we think they're easy questions, but I consider them very tough questions to take time on and pause in your day or wherever you're up to and ask yourself these things. You know, I've had to go back and ask myself like truly, like, what are my values? What are the things I stand for? What do I believe in? If you're not familiar with what values are, I can share some resources with you all online, but you know, quick Google search will lead to a few things, but your values just dictate your decisions. They dictate the habits that form in your life. Those habits dictate the systems you put in place to continue said habits. So when you look back on your life and what are the things you truly care about? Is it like your family? Is it making money? Is it spending time with close ones? Is it traveling? You know, all these things dictate your decision making, and all those decisions led to different events in your life. And when you spend time thinking about your values, you're going to realize, oh, you know, this is why I took that trip to this place, or this is why I ended up meeting this particular person that led me to this thing and then helped me realize this idea, and so on and so forth. And I don't think we as a society are taking enough time these days to really, really slow down, because we are in an environment that gives us information and things to do at constant speeds of light. If you know what I'm saying, it's really up to us to try to slow ourselves down and ask us these questions so that we can, one of my best friends, Kevin Borgia, co-founder of Cora Bakery, always tells me that we need to slow down so that we can speed up. And that's what he's doing right now. He's over in Italy and he's enjoying his great time, but that's what he's doing right now. He's slowing down, and we all need to slow down just a little bit so that we can figure out how to really go full speed at this thing, whatever it comes to our content, our messaging, our storytelling, all of that with the people that we're really trying to reach out there and communicate with. Where are you from? Ultimately, a big part of your life is describing the environment that you come from. And I'm talking about whether like it's your family, whether it's the circumstances you're born into, raised on, the lessons you've learned throughout your young adulthood into the world. What makes you so uniquely you? And if you're someone out there sort of shaking their head or putting their head down, like, well, maybe that's why I came to this webinar, is to figure out like, what is my story? And the whole thing that Robespierre keeps talking about. Well, just know this is that I've had to learn the hard way that you are a unique person. You are someone with a very, very specific set of things that have happened to you in your life, whether you believe that or not. We often think in life that, and if you're anything like me, you may feel like someone who's fallen behind in life or is a late bloomer, so to speak. But if you really think about this, I've learned from reading and learning is that it's literally impossible to be behind in life, because to be behind in something means you need to be behind someone else. And there are only 3 people in life you are ever in front of or behind, and that's your past self, your present self now, and your future self. And every one of us has a unique way of how we are going about our lives right now. So it's literally impossible to be behind in your life at any given point. So you might as well stop feeling so negative about it or feeling down about not feeling maybe this sense of my story is not worth it, or my story is something people would not be interested in at all, right? Because if like me, I had realized that I do have something to share with the world. I do have some specific thing that I want to communicate out to people. And that's up to you to examine yourself, your life, and take the time to do that. And how have I done that? Oh my gosh, I have this amazing thing called a journal. I started doing this late last year, and I didn't also realize that I've been doing it for many years. I was on a website you might know of, Twitter, for so many years, just writing and journaling my thoughts. But whatever medium it might be, whether it's expressing your thoughts through writing, journaling, talking to many close friends who can be a soundboard for you, a healthy soundboard. It's about getting your thoughts that go on in your mind, over 10,000 of them we have on average a day, and somehow finding a way to get that down in a way that you can look back and tangibly look at the things that you constantly spend time and energy thinking about. I like to, I'll probably have a separate webinar at some point in my life about journaling and how that's helped me as I write. But, it's really allowed me to examine my entire life and my process and all the things that have happened to me along the way. So if you aren't someone who is into journaling or has never tried it, definitely reach out to me and we can talk separately about that. But I also just encourage people to find your medium of getting what's in here in your mind down into some sort of concrete format. If you like to use your phone, if you like to tweet things, if you like to write on paper, but I really encourage that. You'll start to notice patterns within your day-to-day, your life. You'll start knowing how to formulate thoughts better in a controlled way. This also helps you if you're an anxious person, like I am. I used to be way more anxious, but that has definitely helped me. And just help you sort of start crafting your story, your message, because now you're just on this habit that you've developed yourself where you're just constantly telling your story to yourself. So highly encourage, starting to think about that. It's not something you've incorporated in your life already. Because the next line, articulating your message, is your story, right? When you go on that next date and the next interesting question comes up, you will have known so much more about yourself in this setting that you just become so confident and willing to share and being able to craft who you really are to people, right? Like we all see our images of ourselves online and all this and that, but there's just so much more that goes on behind the curtain in our minds, in our inner thoughts, that people just simply will never know the full extent of. But it's up to us, if we are so willing and so brave and so courageous to tell that story to people. And in that is where you find your freedom, is where you find your courage, is where you find your business, your idea, or the next big thing that's gonna generate even more happiness for you, right? Other things that have happened to me in my life, or to maybe some of you, right? For me, it was dancing. If you are an artist of any sort of caliber and you enjoy to draw, you get thoughts down on paper through articulating in lines and shapes and forms, and go do that. If you are someone who loves to sing and do that on a daily basis, don't let the world or people or what people might think of you stop that, right? Just go do those things. It took me so many years and so many mistakes to just finally drill that into my thick skull, that truly the way to discover yourself is through experimenting and going down any creative route you could possibly imagine. So if you're anything like me and didn't sort of let that message sink home or sink in and realize that is the way to sort of start crafting your message and your stories, explore and go down these creative avenues. Because once you've done, okay, I'm gonna let this one simmer for just a little longer. If anyone wants to take a screenshot or type in or ask any questions, take a deep breath on this one, because we're getting into the fun part of the next slide, which is going to be how do we even tell that story in the first place? Because communicating our story is now the fun part. You've done the hard part, you've done the reflecting, you've gone back in time, you figured out your timeline, your story, you figured out how you even got to this very moment that you're trying to now tell people out there in the world, or strangers you meet in person, or whoever you end up talking to next, is how do we communicate that? And the great thing is that unlike years past, we now have the largest, greatest, most amazing technology in the world that allows us to communicate in so many different ways. Just reading some comments here from Carla. I've been thinking of writing in my journal again. Maybe this is a sign from the universe right there, Carla. Open up that journal, get to writing, get to telling your story. It will only serve you down the road. I promise you that. Yes, so telling your story. I want to go ahead and just examine, double click into, the way I present myself on social media. I have a philosophy when it comes to social media and communicating with people is that I, in a digital sense, try to replicate just who I am frame by frame as much as humanly possible through the things and thoughts and images and videos that I personally share on my accounts. As a former business owner, as if you are a owner of a brand, that becomes a little different in this way. And I'll have an example of a business I follow that does it really well. But this is for anyone out there that is like a sole practitioner or like your name, who you are as a brand. I find that the challenging but also best part about social media is that I try to just replicate who I am in a digital sense, one for one, so that when you do meet me in person, there's already that sort of wall, that barrier that has already been taken down, like, oh, okay, this person is also just like an upbeat, optimistic, fun person as he does project himself to be online, right? And that's the hard part, because when you're not engaging in person, and it's all online via like text and videos and images, it can be a little cryptic almost, right? It's like, what's this person really even trying to tell me? How is this person sort of changed now in a sense from when I meet them in person to online? And that's hard to navigate for all of us, but that's just something I want to share with you guys. And maybe something if you're thinking about like, oh, okay, maybe how can I switch up the way I present myself? And you hear it from me as like a source of just motivation is, yeah, I really just try to be like the way I speak and all the different ways you can now communicate online and on the internet is how I am in person. I hope anyone out there who knows me personally can attest to that. And I've heard that from many people over the years, and it makes me really happy to know that like the way I project myself is just, I'm just going to come at you 100% in the most authentic, genuine way I can, right? And again, like I mentioned just a few slides back, like that's impossible to get to an exact an exact science, but it's a start. And I think hearing it from someone else who does do this and thinks about this on a constant basis can help you do that for yourself. And then I also want to share, I mentioned Cora from a few slides back, but I'm close to this brand because my cousin is the co-founder and chef along with her boyfriend, Kevin, who I mentioned already through that amazing quote. But I really love how they've taken the brand, the essence and the message of their bakery and their business, Cora, to a level that is just so them, and they had not settled. I live with her and I've seen just sort of ideas go through in her mind and how she uses, she's not, by the way, if you ever go to From Cora, all their content is created by a third person, another family of ours, who creates all the video, all the format. We have our own social media manager that works for the business. But it's amazing how, although my cousin, her expertise comes from the food and the product that she creates, all of this has been articulated through her lens, her mind, down into paper, and then down into helping people who do know how to help her craft her story. So if you're not someone who's super adept into technical abilities of filmmaking or music or videography, just know that as long as you're able to articulate your story to people and have a vision and have a way to curate that messaging, you can find people to help and source that to help you develop and build that over time. So if you take a look at her page, there's a very finely tuned way of how they present their messaging, whether it's through the colors they choose, the way they position certain products and images, to the way they shoot their film and video and the messages they share. So, and all that was organically incredible. I think they're up to 60,000 plus followers since 2 years ago when they opened. And it's not impossible, right? It's just about having and knowing your story and message, whatever it is, to a T so well, at least for yourself, that you can then now figure out and foster the team around you to build that. If that's your goal, if your goal is to expand and grow and get even bigger. So yeah, kind of just two examples there. Again, taking a little bit of a smaller, I want to say a smaller brand. This is me. Like I have big thoughts of big ideas and things I need to get to, but telling it in a very like siloed sort of way through many different formats and mediums, whether it's through my comedy or my jump roping and fitness to my travels and or my photography and then dancing, right? Um, something I'll quickly say is if you're someone that has many niches like me, I was actually recently talking about this with a friend of mine the other week, is don't feel the need to feel like you need to settle on one thing. If you are a personality, a person who engages in many different things, I have a great example. Lawrence Poon, a good buddy of mine in the audience here, he is someone I really aspire to and look up to as someone who's able to authentically tell all the many things that he's into, whether it's his music career or his merchandising or his own brand and image. He has done that so well. I should add him to my next time I speak to an event like this. But don't settle on just one thing that you feel like the algorithm needs to sort of keep you in line, and so that you are only sharing one particular type of messaging, right? Like really own all the different things about your brand or your story, your product, and wrap that all up if you are someone who is involved in so many things. So don't let that sort of deter you or stop you from telling your story. Versus, maybe a more focus here where you do have this vertical of food and bakery and pastries, then that's another way to do it too. But then you can find your other mediums, like how do we express this through storytelling and video and writing and all that too. So just different ways to look at it. And again, there's no perfect, it's funny, it's like the donuts up here. There's no perfect recipe per se, but it all stems back from a few slides ago where it's about just figuring out what that story is in the first place. And then from there, you can start dissecting and how you want to tell them through the different mediums. Okay, now we talked about storytelling, why it's important, what measures can you do to figure out your story. We walked through some examples of how that's displayed on social media through places like mine, where I'm like kind of working on my own brand, or a business on itself with its own like product. But I know there's a focus here in this webinar to really around social media. Now, the last time I spoke, I talked about the internet in general. There's so many places you can go express yourself and generate revenue for your business. But if we look at social media at scale in terms of the numbers, just staggering results. These are the potential amounts of people you can reach with your message and your story at any given day. I mean, just looking at the first one, 2.9 billion people. That's as of a Google search last week. That's more people than there are Christians in the entire world, right? So if you're able to develop a story so well and craft that message to a point where you can start gaining traction and start really getting people to really listen in on you, imagine like the potential you could reach out there. And you don't need the millions of people. You just need a few people to believe in your message and your story to start really gaining that traction. I have this joke I've been working on for so many years, but like Jesus back in the day, right? He had 12 homies. He had 12 followers that really stuck to his story and his every dying word, right? Now I think about back then, Jesus didn't have Twitter, but what would 12 followers back in Jesus's time equate to now in the day of the internet, right? Just think about that for a second, right? If this dude who had a story from up above sent here to tell his story, his mission, could have those 12 dudes follow him around all the time, just imagine what you can do with your own story. And you could get to levels of people really tuning in and listening, right? So just noodle on that one for a second, because maybe I'll write a joke about that one day on stage, but that's sort of something I think about a lot when it comes to people that really are out there that want to listen. I think at any given point, you can probably ask them, well, how many people are following on Instagram or something like that now? And you probably know that answer, but we don't think enough about, who are the people behind those numbers? And are we really speaking to them? Do they really, are we really bringing them value? Because on social media, it's not changing anytime soon. There are infinite amount of places where you can go and express who you are, develop your story, and choose the medium that best fits you, right? I think nowadays Instagram is obviously the hot place where people want to go and feel like, or TikTok, where people want to like blow up and get exposure the most, right? But if you think about it, you as a person have so many different layers. your brand, your mission, your product, your story has so many different layers. So just like that, don't be afraid to experiment at other places, right? I think most of us have a Facebook, but we're like afraid to like use it because we feel like people aren't on there. But when you think about it, it's still like where a lot of groups go down, and for like different interest groups are still interacting, marketplaces where people are selling things. Your family is still a place of support if they use it and are on there. So it's not one of those places that we need to just like overlook and think like, oh, this is an old social media site, right? It's still there. You got to look at this in a way that, okay, how can I tap into each of these, replicate content across places, and then let the content do the work for me where it's going to fit in. And I didn't even add, but like YouTube Shorts is now a new place where I'm just sort of experimenting and throwing things on there. And sometimes those videos get interest and following, and people are listening in there. So you just never know until you try. I'm obviously a big person on Twitter when it comes to sharing my thoughts there. A lot of people have gotten their start all over. I like to stop here quickly on TikTok because I have thoughts about it where it's just it's taken social media and it's just allowed us to really craft and curate and get really weird and experimental with the way we craft our story. And now other sites want to copy that sort of way the algorithm has been able to sort of deliver content to you in almost a way that's a bit scary, right? But it does that and it's good at it. And so it's up to us as creators, as storytellers, to just go ahead and just get crazy on it and experiment and get to a level where we're hopefully just trying to figure out what is sticking there. And I think it's one of those sites that, yeah, a lot of people have found success because they weren't afraid to just try something different on this site. Cool. Let me try time check 12 minutes. So I want to get a couple of these concepts across to you guys to help you when it comes to crafting your story. Once you've done that, once you've sort of like taken a focus and step back on like really diving into social media and understanding like the different platforms and what you can use them for, the next step are just like kind of understanding some of these basic concepts that I like to use every time I decide to post a story somewhere, post a reel, post a post on feed, right? There's three things within content creation I like to remember: lead generating, lead nurturing, and lead conversion. Lead generating is just asking the questions yourself before you post anything. And it doesn't always have to be this way. Obviously, you can post things for fun. That's all great and dandy. But if you're really trying to have a focus on building a following, curating your story, your content, building and growing your business, generating revenue, you want to always think about the why behind lead generating and gaining new people to follow you. When you look at content, it's like, what does this bring to the table? Like, why, if I was stepping out of my own shoe and I saw my own content, why would I follow myself? And looking at yourself in a sort of existential way, right? And creating content in that vein, in that light. Like before you hit send, think about, if that's the goal, what is this really going to do when I post? Is it going to offer some sort of reason as to why you should be clicking in and following and liking and subscribing to my message and my story particularly? With lead nurturing, okay, you got them in the net. Now it's about sort of adding on to, okay, now that you're sort of gauged this interest and you've now are tuning into the things I have to say, what sort of value do I actually bring to you? Why is buying my product? Why is signing up for my service? Why is buying a product with my brand or company going to bring value to your life? And then you start creating content that answers those questions. So it's like you're already answering the question for the person who's going to see the message or the video or whatever it is way ahead of time before you even get there, and just getting a step ahead of that curve, instead of going into something with posting or creating content without necessarily like a strategy, right? Like what's in it for them? You start to notice like, this is where experimenting gets sort of like interesting, right? You start noticing data points around like followers going up or down, right? If you're starting to feel like the way you're telling your story is like losing followers, but you're really enjoying that, I always say like, don't fret about that, about like data points around that. Just focus on, okay, what feels good to you? How do you want to ultimately tell your story? What works for you in the best way? And then the right people that this was meant for will find you and they'll get to you and they'll hear your story, right? So I always say if I end up like losing followers based on like the way I'm expressing myself or or the types of like content I might end up sharing. It's basically like maybe they just weren't meant to end up, you know, being a part of your brand or your story in the first place, right? So I don't try to like worry about that at all. And then ultimately conversion and reoccurring and repeating customers, members, people who are going to continue to stay engaged with you. Once you sort of develop this cycle, now it's about just like fostering and making sure that they stay as engaged and top of mind with you as much as possible. Obviously, people go about their day-to-day lives and it's hard to like have you and your story and your message always top of mind. But when the time comes, when it's ready for that next big thing that you want to announce or tell the world, the nurturing and the generating just keeps people sort of more in the loop and up to date with, you know, what's going on in your life and your world. Context is the content. So this is the last slide, I think, before we wrap it up and get to questions, but sort of driving all of this home from the very beginning, I was talking about storytelling is the vivid description of your life and your experiences and all that. But within your story, there's just so much context that people need to know about, that people need to understand to fully grasp what you're really trying to tell here. For My Cousin's Bakery, for Cora, it was her relationship with her grandmother. It was the recipes that she learned through the course of the years. It was the love and the family values that she now has instilled into her brand and her donuts and her pastries that she learned from our grandmother. And she tells that story very openly and very authentically on her channel, which I think people just gravitate towards. People get and understand that context so well because it is so relatable. It is something that they can stand behind in her brand and her messaging and storytelling. So when you're going back at some point after this is all over and you're going through your story and your messages, just like think about like, what is the full context for how you even got here? And that's why I share things like my timeline for who I am earlier, because it wouldn't really make sense to you like why I care about this stuff so much now if you didn't learn about all the random things that have happened to me in my life. And I added that additional context because context is your content at the end of the day. It's the why that generates why I dance, why I create certain pieces of choreography. What about this song that I'm teaching tomorrow gravitated towards me that I brought it here to the table today? And that helps people cling on. That helps people really engage with you. That helps people understand just a double click further into why they should even care in the first place, is that context and that added value for that. So that's it. Just a little recap is to learn, fully involve yourself in what is storytelling. What is that even? Why is that so important? Why is that something that we continue to even come? Why is that something that I spend so much time on in the upfront talking about? To really fully grasp that you're telling stories every single day, whether you realize that or not. So you might as well get really good at it. And how do we develop that story? I talk about things like journaling, and really journaling has helped me the most. But when I mentioned that slide, and I'll find a way to send this out to you guys so you can have it, but it's just experimenting in creative avenues. Your creative avenues is what's going to get you just sort of thinking and getting your thoughts down, or rather thoughts out. And then it's up to you to really like bring all that home, analyze it, dissect it, and figure out just like who you are deep down. Curating your content and experimenting all over social media is the way you're just going to figure out what works for you and what you're trying to tell in your story. And that's something I'm personally still always constantly trying to adapt or change or switch up. Not too often, but when I find that there maybe is like a new way to tell my story, whether it's through like writing or all this, then I'll go ahead and try to just switch it up and not stay too monotonous and have fun with that. Because once you finally realize who you are and you know yourself so well, that's the hard part. Right? That's the thing we were born into and we're taught from a young age is go, who are you, right? Know thyself, right? Who said that? Socrates or one of those old guys. But now once you figured yourself out, it's now about, okay, the fun part. How do we get that message out into the world using that microphone? And just have fun with it and experiment and go play and figure that out using all the different ways you have and the tools that you have in the internet these days. So I think in future workshops, what I want to do is go into more like best practices and technical skills around using social media. But you know, some of my first speaking events, I really like to drive home this idea of storytelling and knowing yourself better as the baseline for really maximizing your content on social media. Versus like if you go other resources on YouTube, they just hit you with like, oh, make sure you're posting at like 10 a.m. on this day and this time. And it's like, yes, sure, like fine, that's great. And I'm sure there's a lot of data points around that. I'm not knocking that. But I think we're missing a really critical step here is to go back and figure out who you are and what's your story. So thank you guys so much for your time. I'm gonna leave this here. If you guys want to connect with me, ask me questions, shoot me an email. I'm very much happy to chat or talk shop with anybody about, you know, your particular business, your brand. I'm going to check out the comments and see who left their businesses. I'm always very curious about what people are up to. But with that, I know we have 3 more minutes in the webinar. I'd love to open up for any questions that people may have. And if Tao or Patricia or anyone in new media has anything they'd like to say, you know, we have a few more minutes left for everybody, but just thank you guys so much for your time and for listening and cheers to you guys figuring out your stories. I hope everyone is going to have another amazing, beautiful day. Yeah, I guess oh yeah, let me read through some of the comments. If people, oh yeah, if you're in the chat and you haven't introduced yourself, like feel free to, you know, leave your name, what sort of business you work on, your handles, anything you want to shout out so that we can sort of connect with each other.
I guess if we, Rob, if you can help me go to the first slide.
Oh
I
yeah.
really time to thank you. So thank you to all of our attendees for this such an inspiring. And I guess I hope you learn a lot, and I'm really looking forward to see everybody's story on social media. And to recap of our event, as mentioned before, all of this is brought to you by CMPP Program, Community Navigator Pilot Program. SBI create this program to help support all small business to help you thrive and success after the pandemic. All of the services as listed here are completely free and available for all small businesses, as we all want to support our community and help you thrive after the pandemic. So I hope today's session was really helpful for you. And if you need any additional help in terms of social media consultation, website consultation, grant funding resource, any legal assistant, grant writing, as all listed there, please don't hesitate and contact us. We're all here to help support and really helping you there. So with that, thank you everyone for joining us, and I really hope you guys have a wonderful day. And thank you so much, Rob Spear, for joining us today. Really, this is my 3rd time listening to you, but this is always be as good as always. So I really love all your talk. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks, Tao. Thank you, everyone. And yeah, talk to y'all next time.
Thank you, and see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.